Hello friends. About 99% of friends who watch my videos are not subscribed, and I would be very happy if you did. Also, don't forget to press the like button and leave your comments. Your interaction makes the content reach everyone and helps the channel grow. Also, let me know in the comments from which country you are watching the video. Alright folks, buckle up because what I'm about to tell you ain't no ordinary trucker's tale. This is the kind of story that'll make you think twice before hitting those long, lonely stretches of highway at night. As I came around the next bend, my headlights lit up something that froze my blood. It wasn't the roadkill I'd normally see out here. This was different. Right in the middle of the highway stood a figure, tall, unmoving, draped in what looked like a long, tattered cloak. I slammed on the brakes, tires screeching against the wet asphalt, and the truck came to a shuddering halt just feet away from it. My hands were locked on the wheel, heart pounding like a jackhammer in my chest. The figure didn't move, didn't even flinch. I flicked my high beams on, and that's when I saw the eyes, glowing a dull, unnatural orange like embers in a dying fire. It didn't look like a man. Its arms were too long, its head tilted too far to the side like its neck was broken. Then, before I could even reach for my door or the radio, it slowly raised one bony finger and pointed directly at me. I don't know how long I sat there staring, unable to breathe. And just as suddenly as it appeared, the thing turned and melted into the dark tree line on the side of the road, leaving behind a feeling so cold I could see my breath inside the cab. I sat there for another 5 minutes, gripping the wheel, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. But I hadn't. Something out there had seen me and wanted me to know it. I finally got the nerve to start the truck rolling again, slow at first, creeping like I was afraid the road might crumble beneath me. The fog had started rolling in real, heavy, thick enough that the headlights could barely cut through it. I was gripping the wheel tighter than I needed to, knuckles white, eyes darting from side to side, trying to spot any more of those damn things. And I say things because deep down I knew that whatever I'd just seen wasn't human. I'd hauled freight through every state in this country, seen more than my share of weird stuff, but this was different. It felt ancient, wrong, like I'd stumbled into something that had been sleeping a long time and I'd just happened to be the poor bastard who woke it up. About 15 miles up the road, I spotted a small diner off the highway, one of those old chrome-plated ones that looked like it hadn't changed since the 60s. I pulled in, not even sure why, just needing to be somewhere with lights and people. But when I walked inside, it was quiet, too quiet. The bell on the door dinged, but no one came to greet me. Place looked clean, coffee pots warm, jukebox humming some old Patsy Cline tune, but not a soul in sight. I called out, "Hello?" And that's when I heard it. Not from the kitchen, not from the hallway, but from the payphone in the corner. It was ringing. I hadn't seen a payphone ring in over a decade. I just stood there staring at it, not sure whether to pick it up or run back to the truck. Then, against every ounce of common sense I had, I walked over and answered it. The voice on the other end whispered, "He sees you now. You can't leave." I froze with the receiver to my ear, my pulse thudding so loud it felt like it echoed through my skull. That whisper, "He sees you now. You can't leave." It wasn't just a creepy message. It sounded like it was inside my head, like it bypassed the phone and just burrowed straight into my brain. I slowly lowered the receiver, hearing it click against the metal cradle, then turned around real slow, scanning the diner again. Nothing. Still empty. Still quiet. But now, the jukebox had stopped playing. That eerie silence came crawling back, in like a cold fog under the door. My boots thudded on the checkered linoleum as I backed away from the phone and made my way toward the counter. I figured maybe someone was just playing a prank. Maybe some kid hiding in the back. Maybe I just stumbled into the wrong place at the wrong time. I reached behind the counter looking for signs of someone, anything, napkins half used, a pot of coffee still steaming, an open register. Everything looked normal, which somehow made it worse. I stepped around the counter and peeked into the kitchen, empty, pans hanging on their hooks, stove burners glowing red, left on low. No, food cooking. But there was a half-eaten meal on the prep table. Meatloaf, green beans, mashed potatoes. Someone had been eating, recently. Then I heard it again. The phone. Ringing. Same tone. Same urgency. But now it wasn't coming from the corner payphone. This time it was coming from my rig outside. My truck horn. Blasting once. Then again. Then again. I rushed to the window and stared out into the fog-covered lot. The lights on the diner reflected just enough to show me the shape of my truck. The door was open. The horn blared once more, then stopped. And standing next to it, just for a moment, I saw a tall figure in a tattered coat, face hidden by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat, just standing there, staring directly at the diner. At me. My legs nearly gave out. I didn't wait to think. I bolted for the door, threw it open, and ran toward the rig, heart pounding like a jackhammer. But when I got there, no one was around. The figure was gone. The truck was empty. But on my seat, where I'd left my thermos, sat a folded piece of paper. Handwritten. One word. Run. I snatched that paper up like it might bite me. Heart hammering in my chest, and backed away from the cab without taking my eyes off the shadows stretching past the truck. The fog was still thick, like soup you could drown in, and every light from the diner barely pierced it. I crumpled that note in my fist and looked around, but there wasn't a soul in sight. Just me, my truck, and the kind of silence that gets under your skin. I climbed into the cab fast, slammed the door shut, and locked it. I didn't even sit, just stood there inside, breathing hard, watching the mirrors like they were movie screens. Nothing moved, no wind, no footsteps. But the air, it felt wrong. Thick, charged like the moments before a lightning strike. I finally settled into the seat, keys clutched so tight in my hand they might have been digging into my skin. I shoved them in the ignition and turned. The engine didn't even cough, just silence. Cold, dead silence. I tried again. Nothing. Not a click, not a spark. My headlights stayed off. My dash didn't light up. It was like the truck had died all at once, like someone ripped the soul right out of her. I ain't the kind of guy who panics easy. But I tell you, I was on the edge. I reached for the CB, figuring maybe someone was out there, anyone, but it was static. Thick, crackling static, like 1,000 whispers trying to talk over each other. Then through that noise, I heard it again. My name. Whispered. Soft. Ray. My blood went cold. I hadn't told nobody my name that night. I dropped the mic and yanked open the glove box, grabbed my flashlight, and flicked it on. The beam cut through the cab and out the windshield. I swung it across the lot. Still empty. I opened the door, slow, real slow, and stepped down. Boots, hitting gravel like drum beats. I aimed that flashlight toward the diner, thinking maybe I'd go back inside, maybe get help or find a phone that wasn't haunted. But then I saw it, scrawled across the diner's window in something dark and runny. Letters big enough to read clear from where I stood. You shouldn't have stopped. I backed up, mouth dry, flashlight trembling in my hand. That was no prank. That was a warning. I spun around, heart thumping like a jackhammer in my chest, expecting to see someone, anyone, standing there in the fog. But there was nothing. Just the thick mist curling around the truck like a living thing, swallowing the light from my flashlight. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I could feel eyes on me, like I was being watched from every direction, all at once. I took a step back toward the cab, hand fumbling for the door handle, when I heard a sound that froze me in place. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching gravel just beyond the reach of my light. I whipped the flashlight in that direction, but it only lit up swirling fog. I called out, voice cracking, "Who's there?" No answer. Just another step, and another. Then silence. My breath puffed out in white clouds, and I realized how cold it had gotten, like someone had flipped a switch and drained all the warmth out of the world. I scrambled into the cab and slammed the door shut, locking it again. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the flashlight. I aimed it at the passenger seat, and that's when I saw it. Another note. Just sitting there like it had been there the whole time. Same scratchy handwriting, same dried brown ink. This one said, "He's almost here." My throat closed up. My skin prickled. I didn't know who he was, but I knew I didn't want to meet him. I tried the key again. Nothing. Tried the CB. More static. My truck, my only way out, was still as dead as a corpse. I stared out the windshield, and through the fog I thought I saw something moving. Tall, thin, and wrong. It didn't walk, like a man. It glided smooth and slow, like it wasn't touching the ground at all. It had long arms that swayed unnaturally at its sides, and its head tilted as if it was looking straight at me. I couldn't see its face, just the outline, like a shadow carved from deeper darkness. My breath caught. It stopped just at the edge of the lot, not coming closer, just watching, and somehow that was worse. Like it was letting me know I couldn't leave, not until it wanted me to. I sank into the seat, flashlight still in hand, eyes glued to that thing in the fog, praying it would go away. But deep down, I knew better. This was only the beginning. I sat there in the driver's seat, not blinking, barely breathing, gripping that flashlight like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. That shadowy figure never moved, just stood there like some twisted scarecrow planted in the fog. Minutes felt like hours, my heartbeat pounding in my ears, drowning out every other sound. Then, as if the nightmare wanted to up the ante, my headlights flickered back on their own. They cut through the mist like two knives, landing directly on the figure, but what I saw next damn near stopped my heart. Its face, or what should have been a face, was just a void. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just a swirling blackness like someone had carved a hole in space and stuffed it where a head ought to be. And that thing started moving. Not fast, not slow. Just this smooth gliding motion that made my stomach twist up in knots. I threw myself into action, banging the dashboard, yelling at the truck to start. "Come on, baby, not now, don't do this to me." I turned the key again and again, engine clicking but not turning. Outside, the thing glided closer, now halfway across the lot. It raised one of those long arms and pointed straight at me. I swear the temperature dropped another 10 degrees just from that gesture. My breath was fogging up the inside of the cab, the windows going cloudy. I wiped at the glass and saw it was just a few feet away now. Too close, I panicked. Slammed my fist against the steering wheel and shouted louder than I ever had in my life. "Start, damn it!" And just like that, click, roar, rumble, she fired up. The truck came alive like it knew I was in trouble. I threw it into gear and didn't look back. Tires screamed as I peeled out of that lot, fog chasing me like it was alive. That thing still standing there, arms stretched, watching me disappear into the dark. I drove for miles, didn't stop, didn't speak, just white-knuckled it down that black ribbon of road until I saw the first sign of civilization. When I finally pulled into a truck stop, the lights were warm and yellow, the kind that made you feel human again. I sat there in the lot for a long while, engine running, hands still shaking. Thought about telling someone what happened, but who'd believe a story like that? Thing is, I didn't imagine it. I've been driving long enough to know when I've seen something real, and that was as real as the diesel fuel in my tank. And it wasn't the last time I'd crossed paths with whatever's out there on those empty stretches of highway. Not by a long shot. So I'm sitting there trying to calm my nerves, hands shaking like I just walked out of a war zone, staring out the windshield at the gas pumps under that humming yellow light. I could still feel that thing's presence, like its eyes, if it even had eyes, were burned into the back of my skull. My shirt was soaked with sweat, and I don't even remember sweating in the first place. I got out of the cab and stood there for a bit, stretching my legs, trying to convince myself I was back in the real world. The world with snacks and bathrooms and truckers sitting around talking about how bad traffic is on I-40. But none of it felt real. Not after what I'd just been through. I went inside the diner part of the stop and sat down at the counter. The waitress gave me that look, you know, the one that says, "Rough night, huh?" I nodded, asked for coffee, black and strong enough to slap me back to life. She poured it without a word and slid it over. I was still trembling. Then this old-timer sitting a few stools down leans over and says, "You see it didn't?" "Yeah?" I blinked, nearly spilled the coffee. "See what?" I asked, trying to play dumb. "The shadow man," he said, voice low, serious. "Tall, no face, moves like smoke, points at you like it's picking you." My blood ran cold. "How do you know that?" I asked. He took a sip of his drink and said, "'Cause I seen him too. Years back, driving through fog just like you probably were. He don't show up for just anybody. Only those that drive the dark stretches, places where the road ain't been blessed in 100 years. I stared at him. This guy wasn't joking. His eyes had that 1,000-yard stare like he'd lived it just like I had. "What does it want?" I asked. He shrugged. "Don't rightly know. Some say it's death looking for a ride. Others say it marks you, keeps track. Like it's waiting for the right moment to collect." That sat heavy in my chest. Marked. The word echoed in my head. I drank my coffee in silence after that, listening to the hum of the lights, trying not to let my eyes wander too long toward the windows just in case I saw that shape out there again, watching me from the shadows. And just like that, I knew my nights on the road would never be the same. I left that diner feeling like I'd just gotten a look at something I wasn't ever supposed to see, like peeking behind a curtain that should have stayed closed forever. That old-timer's words kept rattling around in my brain louder than my engine ever could. Marked. What did that mean? Was it just something people say when they've seen too much, or was there more to it? I didn't ask, and he didn't explain. He just went back to stirring his coffee like we hadn't just talked about some hellspawn creeping around lonely highways. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just a one-time thing, maybe even a trick of the mind from being too tired, but deep down I knew better. You don't forget something like that. You don't imagine a presence that makes your whole damn soul want to crawl out of your skin and run. I rolled out again after getting a few hours of sleep in my cab. The sun had started peeking up over the trees, that orange haze creeping across the asphalt like it was trying to light up all the things we try to hide at night. I thought maybe the daylight would clear my head, give me some peace. For a while it did. Drove through a couple towns, stopped at a way station, made small talk with a guy who was hauling a load of cattle and said he'd seen weird lights in the sky near Albuquerque. We laughed about it, but it didn't feel funny. Not anymore. That stretch through New Mexico always gave me the creeps, and now I knew why. There's just something out there, something that don't belong to the world we know. Couple nights later, I was taking a route up through Utah, way off the main roads, driving through these rocky canyons with cliffs on both sides. The CB was dead, no signal on the phone, and the stars overhead looked like they'd been stabbed into the sky with knives. That's when I heard the whispering again. Faint, like it was being carried on the wind, but it was there. And it wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from the vents. Now, I ain't saying I believe in ghosts, not in the way most people do, but I believe in something. Spirits, echoes, maybe just bad energy sticking to a place. Whatever it was, I heard it say my name, clear as day, not shouting, just whispering right in my ear. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding out of my chest, cab lurching to a stop on that narrow canyon road. Lights cut through the dust cloud in front of me, and there it was again. The shape, tall, blacker than the night, standing in the middle of the road. No face. Just that empty head turned toward me. And this time its arm was raised again. Pointing. Right. At me. I didn't move. Couldn't. My hands were glued to the wheel, knuckles white, breath stuck somewhere between, a gasp and a scream. That thing just stood there, arm raised like it was accusing me of something. The engine idled low. A soft rumble that somehow made everything around me feel even quieter, like the world had hit pause and was waiting for my next move. Then the lights flickered, just once, but enough to make me flinch. When they came, back on steady, that shadow thing was gone, just gone. Not a single trace of it on the road. I looked around, mirrors, windshield, even opened my door and leaned out, listening for footsteps rustling anything. But there wasn't nothing. Just the wind whipping through the canyon and my own heart beating like a war drum in my chest. I sat there for what felt like forever, engine still running, trying to wrap my head around what I'd just seen, again. Second time now. And each time, that thing was getting closer. First it was behind me, then ahead of me. And now, it was pointing directly at me, like it knew me, like it was coming for me. I pushed the pedal down and got the hell out of there. Didn't care that I was going too fast for that road. Didn't care about cliffs or speed limits or anything else. I just needed distance. I drove until I hit a truck stop near some podunk town that didn't even show up on my GPS. The lights were dim, the signs half lit, and the air smelled like old oil and desperation. But there were other drivers there, real people, and I needed that. I parked, grabbed a coffee, and sat in a booth trying to calm myself down. One of the other drivers, a big guy with a thick beard and a worn-out cap, noticed me staring into space and came over. "You look like you seen a ghost," he said, sitting across from me like we were old friends. I just nodded. I think something's following me," I muttered. He didn't laugh, didn't even blink, just leaned in close and said, "Does it look like a shadow? No face, tall?" My blood ran cold. Yeah, how'd you know?" He tapped the side of his coffee cup. "Because I've seen it too, and if you're seeing it more than once, then you ain't just passing through its territory. It's picked you." "Picked me for what?" I asked, barely getting the words out. He didn't answer right away, just looked out the window, into the dark and said, "That's what we're all trying to figure out, friend." I stared at the guy, every part of me wanting to believe he was just messing with me, playing some weird joke that truckers pass around at grimy stops like this to spook the newbies. But the look in his eyes told me different. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't leaning back and waiting for me to laugh. He looked like a man who hadn't slept right in years. "It starts with sightings," he said, stirring his coffee with a chipped spoon. "You see it once, you think it's the road playing tricks. You see it twice, you start feeling watched. Then it moves. Closer. Each time a little bolder. Sometimes it'll mimic a face, a voice. Hell, one time I heard my own CB radio playing my mama's voice, and she's been dead since '98. I swallowed hard, the hair on my arm standing straight up. "What is it?" I asked. He shook his head. "Nobody really knows. Some think it's the ghost of a driver who died out there, wandering the highway. Others say it's older than that. Some spirit tied to the land, feeding off fear, loneliness, guilt. I don't know what it is, but I know once it's picked you, you can't just outrun it." I leaned back in the booth trying to process what I was hearing. My truck sat just outside, and suddenly it felt like a trap, like climbing. Back into it was walking straight into a cage. "So what do I do?" I asked. He looked at me, real serious now. "You keep moving. You don't stop at the same place twice. Don't sleep in your cab too long. And whatever you do, if it starts knocking on your door at night, don't open it." A chill crawled down my back. "It knocks?" "Sometimes," he said, then stood up like he'd said too much. "Drive careful, friend, and watch your mirrors." He walked out, leaving me alone with that damn coffee and a stomach full of nerves. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I sat in the cab, eyes locked on the rear view, waiting for any flicker of movement, any shape that didn't belong. The rest of that night went slow, like the hours were stretching themselves out just to mess with me. And when the sun finally cracked the sky, I turned the key and kept driving. But something in my gut told me this wasn't over, not by a long shot. That night I pushed through miles of black asphalt, headlights cutting through the thick fog that rolled over the highway like some creeping beast. The silence inside my cab was almost deafening, only broken by the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle from the CB radio. I tried to shake off the story the old man told me, but it gnawed at the edges of my mind like a rat chewing on wood. You see, when you're out there alone for hours on end, your mind starts to play tricks. Shadows stretch into shapes, and the wind carries whispers you swear you hear. But this time it felt different, heavier, darker. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see some shape lurking just beyond the beam of my lights. Hours later, just as I was about to take a break at a small run-down rest stop, I noticed a figure standing on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was a hitchhiker, but there was something off about him. His clothes looked old-fashioned, like from another era, and his face was pale and hollow, eyes dark and empty. I locked my doors and slowly drove past, heart pounding. That image stayed burned in my mind. That ghostly man standing there in the cold, watching me disappear into the night. Over the next few weeks, the sightings got worse. Shadows darted across my path, strange shapes reflected in my mirrors that vanished when I blinked. I heard whispers through static on the radio, voices calling my name when no one was there. One night, while parked on the side of a desolate stretch, I swear I felt something tap on my window. Soft, deliberate knocks that made my blood run cold. I didn't dare open the door. The highway had turned into a place of restless spirits, a nightmare that I couldn't escape no matter how many miles I put behind me. Each night I wondered if this road would be the one to claim me. Another story whispered among truckers, a cautionary tale about the highway that never forgets. But no matter how scared I got, I kept driving. Because that's what truckers do. We keep moving, even when the darkness wants to pull us under. I remember one particular night when everything got so intense, it felt like the highway itself was alive and breathing right beside me. I was hauling a load through the middle of nowhere. Nothing but endless stretches of road and pitch-black forests on either side. The moon was barely a sliver in the sky, and the fog had rolled in thick, curling around my truck like some sinister cloak. My headlights barely cut through the mist, and the silence inside the cab was suffocating, save for the rhythmic hum of the diesel engine. Suddenly, out of nowhere, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror, too close and closing fast. It wasn't uncommon for other trucks to tailgate, but this one didn't act right. It stayed glued to my bumper no matter how fast I went, and every time I glanced back, I caught a glimpse of something, or someone, inside the cab of that rig. It wasn't a driver I could make out. The silhouette was too shadowy, too twisted to be human. The radio crackled with static, and faint whispers seeped through the noise, voices repeating my name like they knew I was alone and vulnerable. My heart hammered in my chest, and I debated pulling off the road, but the fear of what might happen if I stopped kept me gripping the wheel tighter. For what felt like hours, that eerie rig followed me, matching my speed, never blinking. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. No lights, no sound, just empty road behind me. I slammed on the brakes, scanning the dark highway for any sign of it, but there was nothing but silence and the creeping fog. That night, I realized the highway holds more than just asphalt and mile markers. It's a place where the dead and restless roam, where you're never truly alone and where your own fears become your worst companions. And yet, despite everything, I keep rolling down these haunted roads, sharing my story with anyone willing to listen, hoping maybe, just maybe, my words can warn you before you meet the same fate. That night stuck with me like a shadow that won't let go. I kept thinking about those eyes, or whatever they were, in that cab behind me. You know, as a trucker, you get used to weird stuff on the road. Strange lights, odd sounds, people disappearing off the map. But this felt different. It wasn't just a random scare. It was like something was hunting me, watching me, testing my nerve. After that, I started noticing other strange things, like the way the radio would sometimes flicker to life with voices calling out my name, or how my GPS would reroute me to roads that didn't exist on any map. Once, I stopped at a rest area, in the middle of nowhere, hoping to shake off the feeling, but as I sat in the cab, I heard footsteps circling the truck like invisible predators. I looked out, but there was nothing there except the fog rolling in thicker than ever. It's funny how the mind plays tricks, but some things, you just know they're real. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm parked in some deserted truck stop, I swear I hear whispers carried on the wind, soft, urgent, warning me to keep moving. I've learned the hard way not to ignore those signs. The highway doesn't just carry freight, it carries secrets, memories of those who vanished, never to be seen again. And if you stop long enough, if you listen close, maybe you'll hear their stories too. But trust me, it's a story you don't want to be part of. So I keep driving, sharing what I've seen, hoping it'll keep someone else safe out there on the endless dark roads. Because on the highway, you never know what's riding shotgun. One night I was cruising down a stretch of road that seemed to stretch forever, no other cars in sight, just me and the hum of the engine. Suddenly, the temperature inside the cab dropped, like someone cracked a window in the dead of winter. I glanced over, half expecting to see a ghostly passenger, but the seat was empty. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure in the side mirror sitting there like it belonged. I blinked, and it was gone. My heart slammed against my ribs, but I kept my eyes on the road, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. That's when the radio static burst into a clear voice whispering my name. Not once, but over and over, chilling me to my core. I slammed the radio off and kept driving, but the feeling never left me. It was like something was hitching a ride without my permission, watching, waiting for the right moment. I learned that night that sometimes the road brings more than just cargo. It brings the unknown, and you better be ready for whatever rides with you in the dark. So I share these stories not just to freak you out, but to remind you that the highway holds secrets, and sometimes those secrets are closer than you think. That night was one of those nights that sticks with you forever. The kind that settles deep in your bones and doesn't let go no matter how many miles you put between yourself and the memories. I was driving through a stretch of highway out, in the middle of nowhere. No streetlights, no signs of civilization for miles, just endless asphalt disappearing into the darkness. The kind of place where your headlights are the only thing standing between you and the void. I'd been behind the wheel for hours, fatigue starting to press down on me like a heavy weight, but I was determined to make it to my next stop without pulling over. I guess that's when things started to get weird. At first, it was subtle, a chill that crept into the cab even though the heater was blasting, a strange feeling that I wasn't alone. I caught glimpses in the side mirror, just fleeting shadows that seemed to flicker and vanish as soon as I turned to look directly. Then the radio, which I'd turned off to get some peace, suddenly buzzed to life with that static fuzz, and through it I heard a whisper. My name, barely audible but unmistakable. It sent a shiver down my spine. I slammed the radio off, trying to shake the feeling, but it just got worse. I started seeing things on the road, shapes that didn't belong, figures, standing by the roadside that disappeared when I slowed down to get a better look. One time I swear I saw a woman in an old-fashioned dress waving at me, standing in the middle of the fog like she was waiting for a ride. I didn't stop. I've learned not to stop for strange hitchhikers out here. Not all of them are looking for a ride. Then there was the GPS glitch. It started rerouting me down roads that didn't exist. I'd glance at the map, and it showed highways slicing through dense woods where there were no highways, no signs, nothing but trees and shadows. I figured my device was messing up, but the weird part was that the directions would lead me to abandoned places. Old motels, empty gas stations, places with signs peeling and boarded up windows. On more than one occasion I passed these places and felt like the air was thicker, like the history of those spots was clinging to the night, whispering secrets to anyone who dared listen. One night, parked at a lonely rest stop, I tried to get some sleep in the cab, but it didn't work. I heard footsteps circling the truck, soft, deliberate, like someone was pacing just outside. I checked all around, but there was no one there. Just the mist rolling in thick and fast. It felt like something invisible was stalking me, marking its territory. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white, heart pounding like a jackhammer. It's funny, you get used to the strange when you're on the road as much as I am, but this was different. It wasn't just random weirdness or bad luck. It was like something wanted to make sure I knew it was there, waiting, watching. And the longer I stayed in one place, the stronger that presence got. Like the highway itself was alive, breathing, filled with ghosts of the lost and forgotten, those who vanished without a trace, swallowed up by the night. I've met other truckers who have their own stories, tales of sudden cold spots, phantom passengers, and eerie voices on the radio. Sometimes we swap stories in the diner over coffee, nodding knowingly, sharing that silent understanding of what we face out there on the endless roads. Some say it's the highway's way of reminding us we're never truly alone. Others say it's a warning to keep moving, to never stop in one place too long. So I keep driving, sharing these stories with you because maybe, just maybe, if you know what's out there, you'll stay a little safer. Because on these highways, it's not just the miles you have to watch out for, it's what rides with you in the dark. And let me tell you, that passenger doesn't always have your best interests at heart. I remember one particular run that really hammered this home for me. I was hauling freight through the Midwest, somewhere between Nebraska and Iowa, on this stretch of highway locals call the Devil's Backbone. Not many trucks take that route anymore. It's got a reputation. They say trucks break down for no reason. Radios crackle with voices that ain't there, and some drivers just vanish. I didn't believe all that at first. I figured it was just old trucker tales to scare rookies like me. But that night changed everything. The sun had long dipped below the horizon, and a thick fog rolled in so heavy it felt like I was driving through a cloud. The visibility dropped to just a few feet, headlights barely cutting through the gray. The radio was off, the only sound the low hum of the engine and the tires rolling over the asphalt. Out of nowhere, I caught sight of a figure standing by the side of the road, a man tall and thin wearing a dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his face. He wasn't waving or signaling. He was just standing there staring right at me as I passed. I blinked, and when I looked again, he was gone. Shaken, I kept going, trying to tell myself it was just my imagination playing tricks. But then the truck started acting up, lights flickering, gauges spinning wildly. The engine hiccuped and almost died on me twice. I pulled over, heart pounding, and got out to check under the hood. Nothing seemed wrong. The fog pressed in closer, and that's when I heard it, a low humming like a chant, coming from the trees lining the road. I swear the hairs on my neck stood up. I jumped back in, locked the doors, and slammed on the gas, desperate to put as much distance as I could between me and whatever that was. But the road seemed to twist and turn like it wasn't following the map anymore. The GPS was useless, spinning circles. Then the radio kicked back on with static, and through the noise a voice whispered, "You shouldn't be here." I spun the dial, tried to find a station, but the whispering kept coming, growing louder, more insistent, until it felt like it was inside my head. I slammed the radio off again and shook my head, trying to clear the fog from my mind. Just as I thought things couldn't get worse, the headlights caught something on the road ahead, a figure lying in the middle of the lane. I slammed on the brakes but didn't hit anything. When I looked again, there was nothing there, just the cracked pavement glowing in the headlights. My heart was racing so hard I thought it might burst. I looked in the rearview mirror, and there it was again. The man in the hat, sitting on the back of my trailer, eyes glowing faintly red in the dark. I don't remember how long I drove that night, just a desperate rush to get off that cursed stretch of road. When the fog finally lifted, the sun was just starting to rise. I pulled into the nearest truck stop, hands trembling as I told the other drivers what happened. They nodded grimly, told me I'd had a run-in with the Devil's Backbone spirit, a ghost said to haunt that highway, punishing those who dared cross its path. I laughed it off then, but deep down I knew there was something real out there, something ancient and angry. Since that night I've made a point to avoid that route, but every time I pass near it, I feel those same eyes on me, and the hairs on my arms stand up. The highway carries a lot of stories, some of them are warnings, and trust me, if you're out there driving these endless roads, you better listen to them. Because sometimes the highway decides who stays and who doesn't. And if you're unlucky enough to have something riding shotgun with you, well, you might never make it home. After that night on the Devil's Backbone, I thought maybe I'd seen the worst the highway had to offer. But you know how it goes. The road's got a way of surprising you. Months later, I was hauling a load through the Appalachians, a route I'd done plenty of times before, but that trip was different. The sky was overcast and rain was starting to come down in sheets, turning the highway slick and treacherous. I was cruising along a narrow stretch of road winding through thick forests when my headlights caught a figure standing just off the shoulder. A woman, drenched, her hair plastered to her face, and those eyes, man, they were the kind of empty you don't forget. I pulled over, thinking she might need help. When I rolled down the window, she didn't speak, just stared at me with this eerie calm that made the hairs on my neck stand up. I asked if she needed a ride, but she just turned and disappeared into the woods without a sound. Creeped out, I looked around but saw no footprints or signs she'd been there at all. Figured maybe it was some kind of hallucination from all the long hours and rain until the radio flickered on by itself and a soft voice whispered, "Don't trust the road." I shivered and shut the radio off. But then the truck started to shake, like something was trying to shake me loose. The brakes felt mushy, and the steering got heavy. I tried to keep control, but then, out of nowhere, headlights appeared behind me, bright and blinding, but no sound of an engine. The truck behind me wasn't moving, but somehow keeping pace. I glanced in the mirror, and I swear the driver's face was pale, almost translucent, like he was made of mist. I floored the gas, desperate to lose it, but the ghost truck stuck right with me, headlights burning like twin moons in the rear view. The road twisted tighter, and suddenly I was heading towards a bridge I didn't remember crossing before. The structure looked ancient, covered in rust and vines. As I crossed, the radio burst into static screams, and I felt an icy hand grip my shoulder. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it'd rip out of my chest. I slammed on the brakes, but the truck wouldn't respond. The shaking got worse, the headlights flickered, and for a moment everything went black. I've had my fair share of run-ins with things that don't belong in the daylight. But one night something happened that still haunts me every time I roll into a truck stop. It was late, dead of night, somewhere out in New Mexico. I was hauling a load that had me running past midnight, and the highway was nearly empty. I pulled off at this tiny rest stop to grab a quick bite and stretch my legs. The place was deserted except for a few other truckers who looked just as tired and worn as me. I was halfway through my sandwich when I heard a soft knock on my truck door. I looked up, expecting maybe one of the other drivers. But there was no one there. Just the empty parking lot and the dim glow of the streetlights. I told myself it was probably some animal or the wind, but the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I locked the door and finished eating, deciding to get some rest before heading back on the road. That's when I started hearing whispers. At first, just faint murmurs barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator in my cab. Then they grew louder, soft voices calling out names, whispering things I couldn't quite make out, but that felt like warnings. I turned on the radio, hoping to drown out the noise, but the static only grew louder, filling the cab with strange voices that seemed to circle around me. I shut the radio off, but the whispers didn't stop. They seemed to seep through the walls, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Suddenly, the dashboard lights flickered and my GPS screen blinked with a message. "Don't stay here." I blinked, thinking it was some weird glitch, but then the truck shuddered, like something was pushing against it from outside. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out, shining the beam across the empty lot. Nothing. Just the long shadows cast by the streetlights and the still night air. I got back. Inside, locked everything up tight and tried to ignore the voices. I told myself it was stress, exhaustion, maybe even my imagination running wild after so many lonely miles on the road. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. When I finally dozed off, my dreams were filled with ghostly figures walking the lot, their eyes glowing in the dark, reaching out as if trying to pull me into the night. The next morning, I checked with the locals. Turns out that rest stop had a dark history. Years ago, a driver had died there under mysterious circumstances, and since then, truckers swore the place was cursed. Some wouldn't even stop there after sunset. I took one look at that empty parking lot and promised myself I wouldn't either. That night, and many nights after, I realized the highway isn't just a stretch of asphalt and concrete. It's a living, breathing entity filled with memories, with echoes of those who traveled it before us and sometimes never left. As long as I keep driving, I carry those stories with me, hoping to warn the next weary soul who might find themselves alone in the dark, wondering if they're truly alone on the road. Because sometimes the only company you have on the highway is the unknown, and that can be the scariest ride of all. That memory from that New Mexico rest stop never quite left me. Even years later, it creeps back whenever I find myself parked alone somewhere, night thick around me and nothing but the sound of the engine cooling down. You get used to the loneliness out here. Hell, it's part of the job. But that kind of silence, the kind that feels too heavy, too watchful, that's something different. One night, a few weeks after that rest stop incident, I was driving through a stretch of highway in West Texas, a road I knew well, but that night it felt like the landscape was twisting in on itself. I was hauling a load of refrigerated goods, so I kept the rig running steady, lights low, music off, just me and the road. About midnight, I noticed a figure standing right by the edge of the highway. Just a man, or at least that's what it looked like in the headlights. He was wearing a long coat, hat pulled low, standing perfectly still like a statue. I slammed on the brakes and pulled over to the shoulder, heart thumping hard, the engine idling. I called out, "Hey, you okay?" No answer. I stepped out with my flashlight, shining it right at him, but as the light hit, he vanished, just gone, like smoke in the wind. I spun around, expecting maybe someone hiding behind a tree, but there was nothing. No footprints, no sign he'd ever been there. My skin crawled. That was the first time I saw a ghost on the highway, or whatever the hell that was. I know what you're thinking. Maybe I was tired, hallucinating. But I swear on everything, that figure was real. The chill that came after, that wasn't in my head. From that moment on, I started paying attention to the little things. Shadows moving where there shouldn't be shadows, voices on the radio with no station playing, lights flickering when no one was around. Once near a stretch of road called Devil's Pass, I swear I saw a caravan of old trucks, rusted and broken, rolling behind me just out of the corner of my eye. When I checked the mirrors, there was nothing but empty road and dust swirling in the wind. Stories I heard from other truckers only made me realize I wasn't alone in this. Some talked about phantom hitchhikers who disappear the second you try to pick them up. Others spoke of cursed stretches of road where trucks mysteriously break down and drivers vanish without a trace. It's like the highway itself holds grudges and memories. And sometimes it wants to remind us it's not just a path to get from A to B. It's a corridor to places best left unexplored. I remember one time in the Ozarks, I was stuck in a rainstorm so bad I had to pull off. The sky was an angry slate, lightning cracking open the clouds, thunder shaking the cab like the whole world was falling apart. As I sat there, waiting for it to pass, my radio started playing static, then a faint song. Old country, something, from the 50s maybe. But that's not what freaked me out. Mixed in with the music were voices, soft, crying, begging for help. I turned the radio off and rolled down the window. The rain was so loud it drowned everything out except that eerie whisper in my head. I never found out what it was, but I tell you, the highway isn't just a road. It's a bridge between worlds, and sometimes you cross paths with things that don't want to say hello. So I keep driving, keep telling these stories, hoping it'll keep me and the folks out there safe. Because on the highway you really never know what's riding shotgun, or what's hitching a ride in the shadows. Those nights out on the road when the sky is black as pitch and the only light comes from my headlights cutting through the dark, that's when the highway shows its true face. One night I was hauling a heavy load through the Smoky Mountains, the winding roads twisting like a serpent. The air was thick with fog, making the trees look like ghostly sentinels watching my every move. As I climbed a steep incline, my rig started acting strange, engine sputtering, gauges flickering. I pulled over, heart pounding, and stepped out into the mist. That's when I saw it. Faint, glowing eyes staring at me from the tree line, just barely visible in the fog. I called out, but all I got was silence. The eyes blinked, then vanished like smoke. I jumped back in the truck and slammed the door, feeling like I'd just been stared down by something that didn't belong in this world. I kept driving, but the feeling didn't leave me. That's the thing about this life. The closer you get to the edges of the map, the thinner the veil gets between what's real and what's not. I remember another time in a little town in Nevada, I stopped for fuel late at night. The place was deserted except for an old man sitting by the pumps, staring up at the sky. I went inside to pay, and when I came back out, the old man was gone. No truck, no car, no sign he'd been there at all. Weird, right? Then the next morning, when I asked the clerk about the old man, she just shook her head and said, "You must have seen the highway ghost. Folks say he's been around for decades, looking for something, or someone. There are stretches of road where you'll feel like someone's riding your tail, but when you check your mirrors, nothing's there." I've heard other drivers talk about hearing knocking on their trailer doors when they're alone at rest stops, only to find no one there when they look outside. It's like the highway remembers every soul that's ever traveled it, and sometimes those souls want to remind you they're still here. Some nights, I think those eyes in the dark, the whispers on the radio, and the ghostly figures aren't trying to scare me. Maybe they're warnings, Reminders to keep moving, to respect the road, because if you stop too long, the highway might just claim you as one of its own. That's why I keep driving, friends. Because the road is never empty, and the shadows are always watching. You just gotta hope you're paying attention to the right signs and keep your eyes wide open. Because on these endless highways, you never really travel alone. So if you ever find yourself out there, headlights slicing through the night, and you catch a glimpse of something that shouldn't be there, don't look away. Don't try to rationalize it. Just remember, on the highway, you're never truly alone. There's always something riding shotgun, and sometimes that passenger has been waiting for you all along. That night, after what I saw at that rest stop, I started paying closer attention to the little things, the quiet sounds, the way the air would shift just before something happened, like the time I was driving through West Virginia, down one of those narrow, twisting mountain roads that feels like it's been carved out by the gods themselves. It was late, the kind of late where the only light you have is your own headlights, and maybe a flicker from a distant farmhouse. I was hauling a load of fresh produce, so I was careful not to speed. I remember the radio playing some classic country songs, nothing fancy, just something to keep me company. Then, out of nowhere, my truck started to shake, just a little at first, like a whisper of a warning. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw something I'll never forget. A pair of bright yellow eyes staring right at me, floating behind my trailer like a predator waiting for the right moment to pounce. The weirdest part? There was no body, just those glowing eyes hanging there in the dark, unblinking, following me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was a trick of the light or some animal hiding in the brush, but deep down, I knew this was something else. As I rounded a bend, the road ahead disappeared into thick fog, rolling in like a tidal wave that swallowed everything whole. My headlights barely cut through the mist, and the truck's shaking turned into a full-on tremble. That's when I heard it, a low growl, almost like a warning, echoing from the woods on both sides. I slammed on the gas, pushing that rig faster than I should have, heart pounding like a drum. When I finally burst out of the fog, the eyes were gone, vanished as if they were never there, but the feeling of being watched stayed with me the whole way to the next stop. Truckers talk about the beast of the backroads, some kind of creature that roams the mountains, hunting anyone foolish enough to slow down or stop. I don't know if that's exactly what I saw, but it fits the stories. Whatever it wasn't friendly, and it sure as hell wasn't natural. From that night on, I kept a little extra space behind me, and whenever the fog rolled in thick, I made sure to keep my foot heavy on the pedal. The highway has a way of showing you things you never want to see. And those eyes, those glowing, hungry eyes, were one of the most chilling reminders I ever got that out here, you're never truly alone. There's always something watching, waiting, and maybe even riding shotgun with you, ready to remind you just how thin the line between this world and the next really is. And trust me, that's a ride you don't want to take unless you're ready for the consequences. After that night in West Virginia, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had latched onto me, hitching a ride in the shadows of my rig. It wasn't just the glowing eyes or the growls from the wood. It was like the whole highway was alive with whispers and warnings that only someone who spends as much time on the road as I do could start to notice. I began to see patterns in the madness, places where radios crackled with static that turned into voices, stretches of road where compasses spun wild, and miles where my truck's engine seemed to cough and splutter for no mechanical reason. I've been driving these highways for over 20 years, and I've learned to trust my gut. But some of the things I encountered went beyond anything I could explain. One time I was hauling a heavy load through the deep night in rural Missouri. The highway was a lonely stretch with nothing but cornfields on either side, fading into blackness. I was tired and ready to pull over at the next truck stop, but my GPS suddenly blinked off and then came back with a new route that didn't make any sense. It sent me down a side road I'd never heard of. The road was barely more than a dirt path flanked by twisted trees that seemed to lean in, like they were trying to block me from passing through. The moon was a thin crescent barely lighting my way. As I kept going, the air grew colder and the radio crackled to life, playing an old song I hadn't heard in years. One my dad used to listen to back when I was a kid. Then the song faded and was replaced by a voice. It was faint but clear. Turn back. I laughed nervously at first, thinking maybe some prankster trucker had hacked into my radio. But the voice repeated, a little stronger this time. Turn back. Turn back before it's too late. My hands gripped the wheel tighter, but I told myself to keep going. I had a delivery to make. The road ended at an old abandoned farmhouse, windows shattered and walls crumbling. Something about it felt wrong. The silence was too thick, like the house was holding its breath. As I sat there trying to figure out what to do, my truck's headlights caught movement. A figure standing just beyond the tree line. It was a woman, pale and motionless, staring at me with hollow eyes. I blinked and she was gone. I slammed the truck into reverse and didn't stop until I was back on the main highway. That night, I learned the hard way that some roads are better left untraveled, and some warnings should never be ignored. These highways carry more than just freight. They carry memories, secrets, and sometimes something darker. Something that rides shotgun with you when you least expect it. I'm sharing this with you because if you're out there, driving these same roads, you need to know what lurks beyond the headlights. Keep moving, trust your instincts, and whatever you do, never ignore the warnings. Because out here, on the endless stretch of asphalt and darkness, you're never truly alone. And sometimes, the passenger beside you is the last thing you'll ever see. I'll never forget that night on that deserted stretch of highway in Missouri. After getting away from that haunted farmhouse, I kept driving until the sun started to push back the darkness. But the feeling that something was still riding with me never left. I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see that pale woman reappear or some other shadowy figure creeping closer. It was like the highway itself was alive, watching and waiting. I've driven thousands of miles, seen a lot of strange things, but that experience was different. It got under my skin, like a chill you can't shake even when the heater's blasting full throttle. The next week, I stopped at a diner in a small town just off the highway to grab a bite and get some rest. The locals there were friendly, but had that kind of quiet, wary look that makes you think they're all hiding something. I mentioned the strange road and the old farmhouse, and one of the older truckers leaned in and told me, "Son, that place has been a no-go for years. Folks disappear out there. Some say it's cursed. Others say it's haunted by the souls of those who never made it out." I laughed it off at first, but something in his eyes told me he wasn't joking. Over the years, I've come to realize that these aren't just stories to scare new drivers. They're warnings wrapped in folklore handed down from those who've seen the highway's dark side. I remember another time driving through the Rockies late at night, when the road ahead was swallowed by a thick fog so dense I could barely see a few feet. The radio went dead, the truck's lights flickered, and out of the mist, headlights appeared behind me. At first, I thought it was just another trucker trying to pass, but as the lights got closer, I noticed there was no engine sound, no exhaust fumes, nothing. Just those headlights, inching closer and closer, but no vehicle. Tried to speed up, but my truck seemed to slow down like it was stuck in molasses. The light stayed right behind me, and I swear I could hear breathing, heavy, ragged, and right in my ear even though the windows were rolled up tight. I slammed on the brakes and pulled over, heart pounding. But when I looked back, there was nothing there except the swirling fog and empty road. I sat in that truck shaking for what felt like hours until the fog finally lifted with the dawn. That's when it hit me. These highways carry stories not just of the living but of the lost. And sometimes when you're all alone on that endless stretch of road, you're not alone at all. Ghosts, spirits, or whatever you want to call them, they travel the highways just like us. Maybe they're lost souls searching for a way home, or warnings sent to keep us moving, keep us alive. I keep telling these stories to anyone who'll listen, because I want other drivers out there to stay safe. I want them to know that sometimes the real danger isn't the sharp curve or the slick road. It's what you can't see but can sure as hell feel. So next time you're driving late at night, and you catch a glimpse of something strange in the rearview mirror or hear a whisper on the wind, don't ignore it. Because on these highways, you never know what's riding shotgun, and sometimes it's the last thing you'll ever see. The thing about those nights when the highway seems endless and the dark wraps around your truck like a cloak is that you start to feel like you're part of something bigger, something older than any road or city. I've driven thousands of miles, seen more sunrises than I can count, But it's the nights that stick with me, the ones where the world feels thin, like a veil between here and somewhere else is ripped open. That's when you realize the highway isn't just a path from point A to point B. It's a crossroads between the living and the forgotten. One cold night, somewhere near the Oklahoma Panhandle, I was rolling through when my rig's engine started, coughing like it was choking on the air itself. I pulled off at a deserted gas station, the kind that's been abandoned for years, with faded signs and broken pumps, the kind of place where you swear the wind carries whispers if you listen hard enough. I stepped out, the night air biting through my jacket, and that's when I saw the truck. Parked just a few feet away, its paint peeling and windows cracked, like it had been sitting there forever. But it wasn't the truck that got me. It was the figure inside. A man, or what looked like a man, sitting behind the wheel, staring straight at me with hollow eyes that reflected the flickering neon sign above. I called out, but he didn't move. The radio in his truck started playing static, then a distorted voice that sounded like it was coming from 1,000 miles away. I took a step back, and that's when the truck's headlights snapped on, blinding me with a cold, white light. The figure vanished, and when I blinked, the truck was gone too, leaving only the empty gas station behind. I swear I've never been so damn scared and confused at the same time. After that night, I started hearing more stories from other truckers about similar experiences. Phantom vehicles appearing on lonely roads, mysterious hitchhikers who disappear before you can blink, and voices on the radio that warn you to turn back. At first, I thought it was just trucker folklore, stories passed down to scare rookies. But the more time I spent on the road, the more I realized those tales were warnings wrapped in truth. One story that stuck with me was about a stretch of highway in New Mexico they call Devil's Loop. The locals say it's cursed, that anyone who drives through it at midnight risks never coming out the other side. They talk about strange lights dancing on the horizon, sounds that make your blood run cold, and road signs that lead you in circles. I don't believe in curses much, but I wasn't about to test that legend until one night when fatigue and deadlines pushed me too far. I found myself on that loop, the road twisting and turning like a serpent. My GPS went haywire, the screen flickering between coordinates I didn't recognize. The radio started playing old country songs I hadn't heard in years, but every now and then, a voice would cut through the music. A whisper telling me to keep driving, to keep moving, or else. My headlights caught glimpses of figures standing just off the shoulder, people or maybe shadows watching me with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. The air grew thick, heavy with a smell like burnt rubber and something metallic. I gripped, the wheel tighter, heart pounding, willing myself to stay calm. The loop seemed endless, the road folding back on itself in ways that didn't make sense. Time stretched and snapped like the night was playing tricks on me. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. I couldn't tell. Finally, just as dawn broke, the loop spit me out onto a straight stretch of highway, and the world felt normal again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there, waiting on that loop, was still watching, still waiting for the next poor soul to drive into its trap. That night taught me something important. The highway isn't just a road, it's a living thing, with memories, grudges, and secrets that crawl under your skin if you let them. So, if you're out there on the road, especially when the world goes dark and the silence gets too loud, remember this. Trust your gut, keep moving, and don't look back. Because on the highway, you never know who or what is riding shotgun with you. And sometimes that passenger is the last thing you'll ever see. Sometimes when I'm parked at some rundown truck stop waiting for my next haul, I catch myself staring down those empty highways, wondering what's out there just beyond the reach of my headlights. It's like the road has a heartbeat of its own, slow and steady most times, but every now and then it skips, like it's warning you of something coming. I remember one night in Arkansas when I was hauling a load of machinery across the back roads. The sky was clear, stars scattered like diamonds, but the air felt off, heavy, almost electric. About halfway through my trip, my radio cut out and static filled the cab. I tried fiddling with the dial, but then I heard it, a soft, almost pleading whisper. It wasn't coming from the speakers. It was all around me, like the night itself was speaking. The voice called my name, slow and dragging, like it was pulling me deeper into the woods that lined the highway. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst right out of my chest. When I looked in the rearview mirror, there was nothing but the dark stretch of road behind me. No cars, no trucks, no headlights. Just silence and that whisper fading away like a ghost. That moment stuck with me. It's easy to laugh it off, call it exhaustion or tricks of the mind. But when you're out there alone for hours on end, things start to pile up. Little things. Shadows flickering just outside the cab, headlights that vanish the second you blink, and the feeling like you're being watched, even when you're miles from the nearest soul. One time, near the Louisiana bayous, I passed a stretch of road that locals call the Weeping Mile. They say it's haunted by the spirits of those who died there in a horrific crash decades ago. As I rolled past, I swear I heard faint crying carried on the wind, soft sobs that sent chills down my spine. My headlights caught what looked like figures standing by the side of the road, pale and flickering like they were made of smoke. I blinked, and they were gone like they were never there at all. It's not just sights and sounds either. Sometimes it's the sudden cold that wraps around you in the middle of summer, or the feeling of breath on your neck when there's no one there. The highway is full of stories like these, whispered from one trucker to the next, warnings wrapped in tall tales. But I'm telling you, these stories are real. I've lived them, breathed them, and if you spend enough time on the road like I have, you start to see the highway for what it truly is. A place where the living and the dead brush shoulders in, the night. And yet I keep driving. Because maybe that's all we can do. Keep moving forward, lights on, eyes wide open, hoping to outrun the darkness just a little longer. But if you ever find yourself on some lonely stretch of highway, with nothing but the hum of your engine and the cold night air for company, remember this. You're not as alone as you think. The highway has its secrets, and sometimes those secrets decide to ride along for the journey. I remember another night, this one colder than most, deep in the heart of the Midwest. I was rolling through Nebraska, the fields stretching out flat and endless on both sides, lit only by the pale glow of the moon. That night, the highway felt like a tunnel, a thin thread cutting through the dark wilderness, and I was the only soul traveling it. My radio was dead silent, static buzzing faintly like a heartbeat that didn't quite match mine. As I eased into a rest stop off the interstate, I noticed something strange. A faint outline of a figure standing just beyond the edge of the parking lot's dim light. At first, I thought it was just a trucker taking a break, but the silhouette didn't move or breathe, just stood there staring at me. I called out, "Hey, you all right?" But no response came. The air seemed to thicken around me, making it harder to breathe. When I reached for my flashlight, it flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. I felt a sudden chill run through. My bones, like the night itself, had turned against me. I slammed the door shut and locked it, heart hammering, eyes fixed on that shadowy figure that hadn't moved a single inch. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished, melting into the night like a mist. I stayed in the truck the rest of the night, too shaken to sleep, gripping the steering wheel like my life depended on it. When dawn finally broke, the rest stop was empty. No sign of anyone or anything but my own racing pulse. That's the thing about these highways. They don't always reveal themselves all at once. Sometimes it's in a glance, a shadow at the edge of your vision, or a whisper carried on the wind. Other times it's in moments like that when time slows and the veil between worlds feels paper thin. You start to realize that every mile you cover isn't just a trip from one place to another. It's a journey through stories you'll never fully understand. Experiences that change you in ways you can't explain. I've talked to other drivers who swear they've seen phantom hitchhikers, ghostly lights that dart just out of reach, or heard strange music drifting from empty fields. Some dismiss it all as exhaustion or overactive imaginations, but those of us who spend our lives on the road know better. The highway holds a darkness that's older than any of us, and once you've felt it, it never really leaves you. You carry it with you, tucked away in the corners of your mind, always ready to creep back up when you least expect it. Every mile I put behind me on those endless highways seems to pull me deeper into a world that most folks never see. The world where the ordinary and the supernatural collide like two freight trains on a collision course. You'd think after years of driving, you'd get used to the lonely stretches of road, the dark nights where nothing but the hum of the engine and the flickering of the dashboard keep you company. But sometimes it's the silence that's the loudest, like the quiet before a storm or the heavy breath of something just out of sight. One night, I was crossing through a stretch of highway in Nevada, known for its isolation. The desert spread, out on either side like a black ocean, and the stars hung low, distant and cold. I'd been driving for hours and fatigue was gnawing at me, but the road was clear and I kept going. Suddenly my headlights caught something in the distance, a figure standing right in the middle of the highway, just staring at me. I slammed, the brakes heart hammering, but when I got closer the figure was gone, vanished into thin air like a mirage. It wasn't just the vanishing that shook me, but the way the temperature dropped. So cold my breath steamed in the air, even though the desert was supposed to be warm at night. I waited a minute, scanning the darkness, but there was nothing except silence and the faint rustle of desert wind. When I finally started moving again, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and there, for a split second, I thought I saw eyes reflecting back at me from the shadows beside the road. That encounter wasn't a one-off. Over the years, I've had moments where reality itself seemed to bend, a stretch of road that loops back on itself no matter how far you drive, places where compasses spin wild and GPS units fail without warning. I remember driving through a forested part of Oregon once, a route known as the Devil's Backbone. There's an old legend about a cult that used to perform dark rituals deep in those woods, and while I don't usually put much stock in ghost stories, that night was something else. As I drove, the radio started crackling with static and then voices, whispers at first like they were calling my name, getting louder, more urgent. I tried to change the channel, but the voices just got louder until the words were clear. "Don't stop, keep moving." My skin crawled and I hit the gas, trying to get out of that place as fast as I could. Behind me, I swear I saw shadowy figures standing by the side of the road, watching, waiting. It was like the very forest itself was alive and angry, warning me away from something I wasn't meant to find. When I finally cleared the trees and got back onto a main highway, the voices stopped and the radio went silent. I haven't taken that route since. What's worse is how these experiences don't stay isolated. They seem to follow you, creeping into the corners of your mind, twisting your dreams and making you question what's real. There was a stretch of highway in South Dakota where every driver swears they saw a pale woman walking along the roadside, dressed in white with eyes so empty it felt like she was staring straight into your soul. They call her the White Lady, and truckers tell stories of her appearing suddenly in the fog, vanishing when you blink. One night, after a long haul, I stopped for a break and saw her myself, standing just beyond the headlights, her dress glowing faintly in the mist. I wanted to stop and ask if she needed help, but something in her gaze made me freeze. She didn't blink, didn't move, just stared. Then, as I blinked, she was gone. I left that rest area with a chill that stayed with me for days. These roads carry more than just cargo. They carry secrets, spirits, and stories that the wind whispers to those willing to listen. I'm just one trucker among many, sharing what I've seen, because out there on the dark stretches of highway, you never know who or what might be riding shotgun with you. So if you're ever out there alone, with nothing but the road ahead, remember this. Keep your eyes open, your hands steady on the wheel, and your heart ready for whatever's lurking in the shadows. Because on the highway, the stories aren't just stories, they're warnings, and the night is always listening. Some nights, when the highway stretches out endlessly under a blanket of stars and the only sound is the steady rumble of my rig's tires on the asphalt, that's when the weirdest stuff happens. Like that one time in Nebraska, rolling through the middle of nowhere where the field seemed to go on forever and the only light came from my headlights and the moon hanging low in the sky. I was hauling a load that had me running late and I was tired, bone tired. I pulled into a rest stop to grab a quick bite and stretch my legs, thinking I'd get a bit of peace before hitting the road again. But as I sat in the cab, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye, a shadow flickering between the trucks parked nearby. At first, I thought it was another driver, maybe someone sneaking a smoke break. But then the shadow started moving, closer, gliding rather than walking, silent as a ghost. I froze, heart pounding, trying to make out what it was. It didn't look human. Not really. The shape was just a blur, shifting like smoke, but I swear, I could see eyes glowing faintly, in the dark. I locked the doors and flipped on every interior light I had. The radio started crackling with static. Then a voice whispered through the noise. My name, slow and drawn out like a warning. I slammed the radio off, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped outside, ready to confront whatever it was. But when I shone the beam into the darkness, there was nothing but empty parking spots and cold night air. No footprints, no signs of anyone or anything. Just the eerie silence settling back in like a shroud. That was the night I realized this job wasn't just about moving freight. It was about surviving the unknown. Another time, driving through West Virginia on a foggy night, the kind where the mist clings to your windshield like a living thing. I came across an old stretch of highway locals called the Lost Mile. The stories around that road are legendary. Drivers disappearing without a trace, strange lights appearing out of nowhere, and time itself acting funny. As I approached, the Lost Mile, my GPS blinked out, then flickered back on with a route that made no sense. I was supposed to turn off onto a side road that didn't exist on any map I'd ever seen. But the highway was so foggy, and the air so thick, I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. I thought about turning around, but something pulled me forward. A strange feeling I can only describe as dread mixed with curiosity. I followed the phantom route, creeping along this ghost road until suddenly everything changed. The fog lifted, the radio went silent, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Then I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the road just out of reach with a face that was both beautiful and horrifying. She didn't move or speak, just watched me with eyes that seemed to pierce my soul. I swear I heard her whisper, "Don't forget." And just like that, she vanished into thin air. When I finally got back on the main highway, my GPS was working, again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed into some other realm, one where the rules didn't apply. The worst part about all this? The loneliness. Being out there on those endless roads, miles from anywhere. You're alone with your thoughts and whatever else might be lurking in the dark. Sometimes the silence presses in so hard, you can almost hear the past calling out. The lost souls who never made it home. The shadows of things best left forgotten. There was one night in Montana when I stopped at a diner after a long haul, and an old man sitting alone at the counter told me about the highway phantom, a ghostly hitchhiker who appears to truckers just as the sun dips below the horizon. According to the man, drivers who pick her up never make it to their destination, and no one knows where they end up. I laughed it off at the time, but that night, as I drove through the fading light, I saw her, a woman in tattered clothes, thumb out, standing right by the roadside. I thought about stopping, but the old man's words echoed in my mind, warning me not to. I sped past, heart racing, never looking back. I've had close calls, strange encounters, and moments that make me question everything I thought I knew. But one thing's for sure, the highway carries more than just freight and fuel. It carries stories, warnings, and mysteries that don't always have answers. If you're out there on the road late at night, keep your eyes peeled and your senses sharp. Because on these highways, you never know who or what might be riding shotgun with you. And sometimes that passenger isn't someone you want to meet. Sometimes when the miles drag on and the isolation sinks in deep, the highway feels alive. Not like a road made of concrete and steel, but like a living thing, watching you, learning your habits, waiting for the right moment to remind you that you're never truly alone out here. I've met other drivers who swear they've seen strange things too. Ghostly hitchhikers, trucks that vanish into thin air, lights that float in the sky and follow you for miles. It's like the highway holds its own kind of haunted memories, carved into the asphalt and etched into the night air. I tell these stories not to scare you, but to share what it's like living on the edge of the unknown, driving endless miles, into darkness where the past and present blur together. So next time you see a truck barreling down the highway at night, remember there might be more than just a driver behind the wheel. There might be a whole world of shadows riding shotgun, waiting for their chance to hitch a ride. And if you ever find yourself alone on one of those forgotten stretches, keep your eyes open, your wits sharp, and for God's sake, keep moving. Because on the highway, you never know what's riding shotgun, and sometimes it's better if you don't find out. I remember one night when that feeling of being watched hit me harder than ever. I was rolling through a stretch of highway in New Mexico, a long, desolate road known for its sharp curves and endless desert on both sides. The moon was a thin crescent, barely lighting up the world around me, and my radio had gone static. Dead silence that made everything feel heavier. I had been driving for hours, tired but trying to stay sharp, when suddenly, my headlights caught something unusual in the distance, something standing in the middle of the road. At first I thought it was a person, maybe someone stranded, but as I got closer, the shape didn't look right. It was tall, way too tall, with limbs that seemed longer than any humans should be. It didn't move as I approached, just stood there staring. The kind of stare that crawls under your skin and makes your blood run cold. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding, and rolled down my window, expecting maybe to hear a shout or a plea for help. But there was only silence. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something flash. A quick, sharp movement that made me jerk my head around, but there was nothing there. When I looked back forward, the figure was gone, vanished, like it was never there at all. My hands shook on the wheel as I eased back onto the road, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. The rest of that trip was a blur, and every shadow on the roadside made me jump. I even double-checked the truck's mirrors to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. Other drivers I've talked to swear they've seen similar things, shapes that disappear when you try to focus on them, figures that vanish when the light hits just right. Some say it's spirits. Others say it's something darker, something that's been haunting these highways long before trucks ever rolled down them. There was another time out in Wyoming where the radio started playing songs I didn't recognize, but they sounded wrong, like a twisted lullaby sung in a language I couldn't understand, just faint enough to make my skin crawl but loud enough to be impossible to ignore. I tried turning the radio off, fiddling with the knobs, but the music just kept coming. I pulled over and cut the engine, hoping that would stop it, but the truck seemed to have a life of its own that night. The music faded into whispers, voices calling out names I'd never heard before, but that felt oddly familiar, like they were etched into my memory from another life. I got out of the truck, heart hammering, and scanned the empty desert around me, but there was no one. No signs of anyone or anything, just the cold night and the distant howl of coyotes. I started the truck again and hit the road, speeding away from that spot as fast as I could. But the feeling of those whispers clung to me for weeks afterward. You learn to respect that feeling because ignoring it doesn't end well. It's like the highway has its own rules. Rules you don't see on any map or traffic sign, but rules you break at your own peril. Every time I drive through those lonely moonlit highways, I keep a lookout for the unseen. I don't always understand what I'm dealing with, but I've learned that it's better to acknowledge the strange and keep moving than to stop and invite it in. The highway has stories, dark stories that most folks don't talk about, but I've lived them. And if you listen close enough, maybe you'll hear them too. Just remember, out here on these roads, you never really drive alone. Something's always riding shotgun, watching, waiting for its moment. I can't tell you how many times I've caught glimpses of things that didn't belong in this world, things that looked like they were made of shadows and mist, slipping along the edges of my headlights. Sometimes it's just a flicker out of the corner of my eye, like a dark figure darting behind a tree or a silhouette standing motionless beside the road. Other times it's more direct, like those times when you feel the temperature drop so suddenly you can see your breath, even in the middle of summer, or when the hairs on the back of your neck stand up like you're not alone in that cab. The worst part is knowing you're probably not. I once met a fellow trucker in a diner out in Arkansas. An old guy with a face like weathered leather and eyes that seemed to have seen too much. He told me stories that chilled me deeper than the coldest night I've ever spent on the highway. He said the roads have memory, that they remember every soul that's disappeared on them, every tragedy, every unexplainable vanishing. And sometimes those memories get restless. reaching out to anyone who's passing through looking for company or revenge, or maybe just to be seen. One of the strangest encounters I had was on a foggy night in Pennsylvania. I was hauling a load of machinery and was feeling the usual tiredness creep in after hours behind the wheel. The fog was thick, so thick that the road ahead looked like it was fading into nothingness. Suddenly, through the gray, I saw headlights coming at me. Another truck, big and roaring just like mine, closing in fast. I moved to the shoulder thinking they'd slow down, but the truck didn't pass. It stayed right behind me, tailgating like I was some slowpoke holding up traffic on an empty road. I glanced in the rearview mirror and caught sight of the driver, or at least what should have been the driver. The window was dark and the silhouette behind the wheel looked wrong. No features, just a black void where a face should have been. I slammed on the brakes, heart racing, and the truck disappeared like a ghost. The fog cleared a bit and the road was empty again. No sign of the rig or the driver. That moment stuck with me longer than I care to admit. Another time, around midnight somewhere in Texas, I stopped at a small roadside diner, hoping to grab a hot meal and shake off the creeping dread that sometimes builds after hours of solitude. The place was nearly empty, just a couple of locals chatting quietly and a waitress who smiled too wide and never blinked. I ordered my usual, coffee and a burger, and as I ate, I noticed the clock on the wall ticking backward. I laughed it off, thinking maybe the old clock was broken, but then I realized my watch was running backward too. When I asked the waitress about it, she just smiled that same unnerving smile and said, "Time's funny out here. It likes to slip through the cracks." I paid quickly and left, but as I climbed back into my truck, I felt like I was stepping out of one reality and into another. The highway is full of stories like these, stories that don't make it into the news or the podcasts. Stories of vanished trucks, ghostly hitchhikers who vanish as soon as you try to help, strange roadside shrines made of twisted metal and old bones, and roads that seem to loop back on themselves, trapping drivers in a never-ending nightmare of asphalt and shadows. Some nights when I'm parked at a lonely rest stop, I swear I can hear the distant sound of a horn. A warning or maybe a call to those of us still driving the highway, telling us to keep our eyes open and keep moving because whatever's out there isn't done yet. I'm just a trucker trying to get from point A to point B, but the highway doesn't care about plans or schedules. It has its own plans, and it's been playing this game long before I ever climbed behind the wheel. And so, I keep driving, sharing these stories because if they help just one person stay safe, it's worth it. Because on the highway, my friends, you never know what's riding shotgun. When the engine finally roared back to life, I was somewhere else, off the map, a dead-end road swallowed by thick trees and shadows. The ghost truck was gone, but that woman's empty eyes were burned into my memory. I sat there for what felt like hours, trying to steady my breathing, feeling like the road itself was watching me, waiting. When daylight finally broke, I managed to get the engine started again and found my way back to the highway. I told myself it was all just exhaustion and bad weather playing tricks, but deep down, I knew that night was another reminder that the highway carries its own kind of darkness. You think you're in control, but sometimes the road has other plans, and if you're not careful, it'll take you places you never wanted to go. Since then, I've learned to trust those uneasy feelings, the sudden chills, the whispers on the radio, the shadows in the corner of your eye. They're warnings from the highway, telling you to keep moving, to never stop too long. Because sometimes, the things out there aren't just stories. They're real. And if you linger, if you let your guard down, the highway might just decide to keep you forever. That's the kind of story that keeps me driving, keeps me telling you all this. Because the next time you're out there cruising those endless miles, remember, on the highway, you never know what's riding shotgun, and some passengers don't want to get off. That night, after escaping that ghost truck and the woman with those empty eyes, I thought I'd seen the worst the road could throw at me. But the highway, well, it's got a funny way of teaching you that no matter how long you've been driving, you never really know what's waiting just around the next bend. A few weeks later, I was hauling freight through the heart of Texas late at night when the world feels like it's been swallowed by darkness and silence except for the hum of your engine and the rhythm of your tires on asphalt. I was alone, The kind of alone that settles in your bones, and I had that uneasy feeling again. The kind that makes you check your mirrors too often, even when you know nothing's there. As I cruised past a stretch of desert that looked like it hadn't seen a soul in years, my radio cut out, going dead silent like it was never wired in the first place. I hit the knobs and buttons, but nothing. No static, no music, no chatter, just nothing. Then, out of nowhere, the truck started acting strange. The lights flickered, the gauges went haywire, and I felt the cab temperature drop so suddenly it was like winter had slammed its fist right through the dashboard. I wrapped my hands around the steering wheel tighter, trying to focus, but then my headlights caught something on the side of the road. Figures standing still, lined up like they were waiting for something or someone. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and when I looked again, they were gone. No footprints in the dirt, no disturbance in the sand, just empty nothingness. The radio crackled to life then, barely audible, but there was a voice whispering, soft and menacing, "You shouldn't have stopped." Goosebumps broke out all over me as the voice faded, replaced by a chilling silence that seemed to press in from every side. I floored the gas, trying to get away from whatever it was, but the truck slowed, like some unseen force was holding me back. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, but it felt like I was trapped in a loop, driving the same patch over and over. I saw headlights behind me again. Not a truck. This time more like a cluster of glowing orbs floating closer and closer. My heart hammered, and I knew whatever this was, it wasn't friendly. I kept driving until the sun cracked the horizon, bathing everything in harsh light, and when I finally stopped at a roadside diner, the world seemed normal again. But I wasn't. The silence in the cab was louder than any noise I'd ever heard, and I realized the highway had left its mark. It's funny. When you spend as much time on the road as I have, you learn to read the signs, to listen to the whispers, and to respect the darkness that clings to these endless miles. Because on the highway, the stories you tell aren't just tales to scare the newbies, they're warnings. And if you listen close enough, you might just live to tell your own. So here I am, sharing these stories with you, hoping that maybe by telling you what I've seen and felt, you'll be ready when your own road turns dark and strange. Remember, the highway isn't just pavement and paint lines. It's a living, breathing thing full of memories, lost souls, and shadows that ride shotgun. And trust me, some of those passengers don't want to let go. Driving through those endless nights, I started noticing little things most folks wouldn't pay much mind, but a trucker with miles in his bones learns to catch every detail. Like how the wind sometimes carries voices that aren't on any radio, whispering warnings in a language only the road seems to understand. Or how certain stretches of highway seem to swallow up your sense of time, where your watch stops ticking, right, and the stars flicker like they're trying to signal you to turn back. I remember one night rolling through a stretch of highway in New Mexico that was supposed to be a straight shot. But my GPS started glitching, rerouting me off the main road onto a dirt path that wasn't even on the maps I had. Against my better judgment, I followed it, curiosity gnawing at me like a bad habit. The dirt path twisted through a dense patch of desert scrub that seemed to close in tight, the moonlight barely piercing the canopy of mesquite trees. The silence there was deafening. No crickets, no owls, just the sound of my tires crunching gravel. Then I saw it. An old gas station that looked abandoned for decades, half sunken into the earth, its windows shattered, paint peeling. But the pump still stood, flickering with a ghostly blue light. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, but something drew me closer like I was being pulled by an unseen hand. Before I could think twice, the engine sputtered and died. The cab went dark, the dashboard flickering off like a candle snuffed out. I tried the ignition, the lights, anything, but the truck was dead as a doornail. That's when I heard the footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the truck. No matter how hard I looked, I couldn't see a thing. Then came the whispering again, closer this time, voices overlapping in a cacophony of pleas and threats. I swear I heard my own name carried on the wind, begging me to run. I didn't wait for a second invitation. I jumped out, heart pounding, so loud I thought it might burst right out of my chest, and I sprinted towards the main highway. When I finally hit the asphalt again, the truck roared back to life like nothing had happened. I kept driving, eyes glued to the rearview mirror, expecting to see shadows chasing me, but there was nothing, just the dark highway and the endless stars above. That night taught me that some parts of the highway aren't meant to be driven on, and some ghosts don't want to be left behind. The road carries stories, some better left untold, but I'm here sharing mine, hoping you'll listen and be ready. Because on these highways, it's not just about what's in front of you, it's about what's riding shotgun, unseen, waiting, and that's a ride you don't want to take unprepared. The next few nights after that encounter, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was glued to my tail, something that wasn't just a figment of my tired mind. I kept hearing noises, soft thumps on the roof of my truck, the occasional tap-tap on the metal sides like fingertips drumming out a warning. I thought about pulling over at a busy truck stop, but those places feel safe for a reason, and sometimes it's the lonely, empty stretches of highway where the real trouble hides. One night I was hauling a load from Texas up through Oklahoma, the sky thick with clouds and a low fog rolling in like a thick blanket. The road was slick from a recent rain, and visibility was near zero except for the glow of my headlights cutting through the gloom. That's when I saw the figure, standing by the side of the road. Just a silhouette at first, but as I got closer, I could make out the shape of a man wearing an old-fashioned hat and a long coat, standing perfectly still, staring at me with empty eyes that reflected the headlights like dark mirrors. I slammed on the brakes, heart hammering in my chest, the truck sliding on the wet asphalt. When I stopped, the figure was gone. No footprints in the mud, no sign that anyone had been there at all. I called out, my voice cracking, but all I heard was the echo of my own breath. That night, the highway wasn't just a stretch of asphalt. It was a stage for something out of place and out of time. I kept driving, but the image haunted me, the hollow stare, the sense that I had just narrowly missed something that didn't want to be seen, but wasn't going anywhere. I didn't tell anybody about the doll, not at first. How do you explain something like that without sounding completely nuts? But I kept driving, kept pushing through my routes, even though every mile felt heavier than the last. There was this growing weight in the air, like the whole world was holding its breath, the kind of quiet that ain't natural, like the space between heartbeats, the space between lightning and thunder, that tension, that pause before something awful happens. I'd pull into truck stops and the lights would flicker, even in brand new facilities. I'd step out to fuel up, and I'd feel eyes on me, burning, hot against the back of my neck. But when I turned around, there'd be no one. Sometimes the gas pump would start on its own. Once, the screen flashed something I'll never forget. Instead of insert card, it said, "We see you." I thought maybe it was a glitch, maybe someone hacked it. But when I looked around, none of the other drivers seemed to notice. They just went about their business like nothing was wrong. That's when I started keeping a camera on the dash. I figured, if I was going to go insane, I wanted proof. Something to remind myself it was real. I recorded everything. And for a while, nothing weird showed up on the footage. But then came the night outside Amarillo, Texas. A storm rolled in fast, darker than night should ever be, and as I watched the lightning flash across the sky, I saw silhouettes, figures, tall and still, just standing on the sides of the road. Not moving, not blinking, just watching. It wasn't until I reviewed the footage that I realized they didn't reflect light. Everything else did, the road signs, the wet pavement, even the tumbleweeds. But those figures were just voids, like shadows that had torn themselves loose from the world, and I'll never forget the noise. It started as static, a soft crackling, through the CB radio, then rose into this low, throaty hum that vibrated through the wheel and up my arms. I reached to turn it off, but before I could, a voice whispered clear as day, "Keep going, don't stop, don't look back." I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I was going to pass out right there at the wheel. I hit the gas harder than I ever had before. Whatever was out there wanted me moving, and I wasn't about to argue. Hours later, the storm cleared, the road smoothed out, and the hum faded. But the fear didn't. That night didn't just shake me, it marked me. I could feel it like an invisible hand pressed against my back, always nudging me forward. And every once in a while, that same voice returns even when the radio's turned off. Thing is, I think I'm being warned, not just for me, but for others, like you, like anyone listening. Because whatever's out there on the highway, it's spreading. So I guess if you've made it this far, you're probably wondering how it all ended, how I made it out, or if I ever did. Truth is, I ain't so sure myself. After that night near Amarillo, things didn't go back to normal. The road never felt the same again. That voice, the static, those dark figures, they started showing up more often, in more places. It didn't matter if I was in the mountains of Colorado or the flat stretches of Kansas. Something was always waiting just beyond the reach of my headlights. I tried quitting once, parked the rig for good. Thought maybe if I just stepped away, left the road behind, I could get back to a normal life. But strange things kept happening. TVs would turn on by themselves, my phone would ring with no one there. And once I swear I saw that same little doll from the forest sitting on my front porch, bone dry despite the rain pouring all night. I couldn't escape it. The road had become a part of me. One night I took one last load across Nevada. Figured I'd put the nightmares to rest. It was quiet at first. Too quiet. I didn't see another vehicle for hours, not even a passing pair of headlights. The moon was high, the desert flat and endless. But then my GPS lit up with a message. No voice, no map, just a single word. Return. I pulled over, hands shaking, and looked out across the open land. That's when I saw it again. Those same tall black figures, maybe a dozen of them, standing in the distance, all facing me, not moving, not blinking, just waiting. My lights flickered, the engine sputtered, and the air grew cold as death. I should have been scared out of my damn mind, but instead I felt calm, like I understood something finally. The highway doesn't just connect cities. It connects worlds. It holds memories, lost souls, echoes of things that don't belong in our world. And once you've seen too much, once it knows you've heard its call, it doesn't let go. It needs you, maybe to carry the stories, maybe to warn the others. So I did what I always do. I got back in the cab, gripped the wheel, and drove straight ahead. I didn't look back, haven't since. If you're out there driving and the road suddenly changes, if your GPS reroutes to somewhere unfamiliar, if your CB crackles with voices you don't know, listen close. Keep going. Don't stop. Don't look back. And above all else, remember this. On the highway, you're never alone. Something's always riding shotgun. I can tell you, after years on the road, I've learned that the highway is more than just asphalt and lines. It's a place where reality bends, and the rules you thought applied don't always hold. One night, I was cruising through a stretch of highway in Montana, miles away from the nearest town, when my headlights caught something strange on the side of the road. It looked like an old battered sign, weathered and barely readable, but what caught my attention was that it flickered, like a neon sign trying to stay alive. Curious, I slowed down, and that's when I saw the hitchhiker. Not the usual type, mind you. This one was dressed in clothes that looked like they belonged to another era, maybe the 1940s or 50s. His face was pale and his eyes, well, they were hollow like empty windows staring back at me. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, but he just stood there, motionless, thumb out. The kind of thing you see in horror movies. But here I was, in the middle of nowhere, with nowhere to turn. Something in me told me not to pick him up. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and kept going, but then I felt it. This heavy presence in the truck, like someone sitting right beside me, breathing cold air down my neck. I glanced over, expecting to see the hitchhiker, but the seat was empty. The radio suddenly sputtered to life with static, then a faint voice whispering, "Ride with me." I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding. When I looked back in the mirror, the figure was gone, but the feeling lingered, heavy and suffocating. I kept driving, not daring to stop until I hit the next truck stop, where the lights and the company of other drivers finally made me feel safe again. Stories like that, they're not uncommon out here. Some truckers talk about phantom vehicles that chase them down lonely stretches of road, only to vanish when headlights catch them. Others speak of ghost towns that appear and disappear, trapping drivers in time loops. For me, it's all part of the job, the strange and the unexplained. But what really gets me is how these experiences mess with your head. They make you question what's real and what's not. Sometimes I wonder if the highway itself is alive, watching, waiting for its next passenger to join the ride. So if you ever find yourself driving down a dark highway and you see a figure standing there or hear your name whispered through static, remember this: you might not be alone. The highway has its own stories to tell, and some of them are written in shadows that never fade. Keep your eyes sharp and your wits about you, friend, because you never know what's riding shotgun. I swear, every time I hit those lonely roads after dark, that feeling creeps back in. The kind that settles deep in your bones and won't let go. It's like the highway breathes in the silence and exhales the unknown, filling your cab with a presence you can't shake. One time, I was rolling through a narrow pass in the Rockies, the kind where the cliffs seem to lean in like they're about to swallow you whole. The night was dead silent except for the hum of my engine and the crunch of gravel under my tires. Suddenly, out of nowhere, my radio burst to life with a crackle, playing an old country song I hadn't heard in years. Whiskey River. I smiled at the nostalgia for a moment, then realized the dial wasn't even on that station. Before I could switch it off, the song cut out, replaced by a voice, a woman's voice, soft but urgent. Don't stop, keep moving. I froze, staring at the dash, heart thudding. The voice wasn't on the radio anymore, it was in my ear, clear as day. My skin crawled as I scanned the road behind me in the mirror, half expecting to see a tail, light or some sign of life. But there was nothing, just the black night swallowing everything whole. I gripped the wheel tighter, eyes darting between the road ahead and the mirrors. That's when I noticed the headlights in my rear view weren't moving, like they were stuck, fixed on me no matter how fast I pushed the pedal. I dared a glance to the side window and caught a glimpse of something out there. Something tall, dressed in dark clothes, standing still in the trees that lined the highway. I blinked, and it was gone. Every mile felt like a battle. My hands sweated, my breath short, but I kept driving. When I finally reached the next exit and pulled into a gas station, I sat there for a long time, heart pounding, replaying what just happened. I wasn't sure if I'd encountered a ghost, some twisted echo of the past, or if the road was just messing with my mind. Maybe it was all three. That's the thing about these highways. They're like living nightmares that ride along with you. They test you, push you to the edge, and if you're not careful, they'll pull you in. I've learned to trust those gut feelings, the warnings whispered on the wind and carried through static, because sometimes that's what keeps you alive. So next time you're out there, late at night, and you think you see something strange, or hear your name called out in the dark, don't ignore it. The highway's watching, and it always wants to tell you a story. Just make sure it's one you want to hear. The more I drove those haunted highways, the clearer it became that the road itself had a memory, etched deep into the asphalt, whispered through the wind, and hidden in every mile marker. I remember one stretch in particular, out near the Texas Panhandle, where the sun seemed to set too fast and the shadows stretched longer than they should. It was late, just past midnight, and I was hauling a load of produce from Amarillo to Dallas. The radio was dead quiet, and the only light came from my headlight slicing through the endless black. Suddenly, out of nowhere, I saw a figure standing on the side of the road, waving like a stranded traveler. Now, most truckers would have pulled over to help. But something about this silhouette didn't sit right. The figure was motionless except for that slow, deliberate wave, and I swear the shape was too tall, too thin, like it belonged more to a nightmare than reality. Despite the uneasy feeling gnawing at me, I slowed down and pulled over a little. Ahead, when I got out to check, the spot where I saw the person was empty. No footprints, no signs someone had been there. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. As I climbed back into the cab, I noticed my GPS was glitching. Routes changed, destinations vanished, and new roads appeared that weren't on any map. Driving on, I caught glimpses of shadowy figures dancing just beyond my headlights, flickering at the edge of my vision. At one point, my engine sputtered and died on an empty stretch with no cell service for miles. The silence was suffocating. Then, through the dark, a whisper reached my ear, soft but chilling. "You can't escape the road." The words seemed to echo inside my skull. I managed to restart the truck and sped off, but that night marked the beginning of a series of experiences that made me question everything I thought I knew about the highway. It wasn't just a road. It was a gateway to something else, something ancient and restless. Friends, if you're out there driving the night shifts, keep your eyes peeled and your wits sharp. The highway has its own rules, its own dangers hidden beneath the surface. And trust me, sometimes the scariest rides aren't the ones you take behind the wheel, but the ones that come riding shotgun with you. You know, after all those nights driving through darkness thicker than tar, I started noticing patterns. It's like the highway has its own heartbeat, its own rhythm that only people who spend enough time on the road can feel. Some nights it's calm, almost peaceful, but then there are those other nights, the ones where the air feels charged, like something just beyond the headlights is watching, waiting. One night I was hauling through a stretch of road near the old Pine Ridge forest, and the temperature inside my cab dropped suddenly. The heater was cranked up full blast, but I could see my own breath fogging up the windshield. That's when I saw it, a shadowy figure standing right beside the road, barely visible through the swirling fog. It wasn't moving, just watching. I tried to blink it away, told myself it was my mind playing tricks, but when I glanced back again, it was gone. That wasn't the only strange thing I saw out there. There was the time I passed a broken-down car at a rest stop, and when I looked inside, there was an old woman sitting there, staring straight ahead with empty eyes. When I blinked, she was gone too. I asked around the next day and found out that a woman matching her description had died there years ago. It's moments like those that make you realize the highway remembers more than just trucks and trailers. It remembers people, memories, pain. But here's the thing about all this. Once you've seen the road's dark side, you don't forget it. You carry it with you like a secret badge of honor or a warning stitched into your soul. I've had nights where the radio switches on by itself, crackling with voices speaking languages I don't understand, or calling my name in a whisper that sends chills down my spine. Sometimes those voices tell me to keep moving. Sometimes they warn me to watch out. And sometimes, well, I just shut the radio off and drive faster. People who haven't been on the road might not get it. But for us truckers, the highway is more than asphalt and mile markers. It's a living, breathing thing, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel. It tests you, pushes you to the edge, and if you listen closely, it might just save your life. I don't know what waits out there in the dark, ghosts, lost souls, or something else entirely, but I've learned that respect is the best armor. Respect for the road, for the stories it holds, and for the shadows riding shotgun. So if you ever find yourself driving down a lonely highway late at night and you feel a presence beside you or hear a whisper on the wind, just remember my story. You're not alone out there, and sometimes the road has company. Keep your eyes sharp, your mind sharper, and whatever you do, don't stop moving. Because on the highway, the shadows don't like to be left behind. I remember another night, just a few months after that Pine Ridge encounter, when I was hauling a load across the outskirts of an old mining town in Nevada. The kind of place where the streetlights flicker like they're about to give up, and the buildings lean in like they're whispering secrets to each other. I was cruising down this 2-lane stretch, the silence broken only by the hum of my engine, and the occasional crackle from the CB radio. Out of nowhere, my headlights caught something standing in the middle of the road. A man, or what looked like a man, but his clothes were ragged and his skin had this unnatural pallor, like he'd been buried and dug up a dozen times over. I slammed on the brakes hard enough to skid the tires, but by the time I came to a stop, he was gone. No footprints in the gravel, no sign he'd ever been there. That was when the radio came alive again, only this time it wasn't the usual chatter or static. It was a voice, low and gravelly, almost a growl, saying, "Keep going. Don't look back." I turned up the volume, hoping someone was messing with me, but the channel was dead except for that one chilling message. I swear I could feel a cold breath on my neck, but when I checked the mirrors, nothing was there. My heart was pounding, like a freight train, but I pushed the pedal down and kept moving. eyes darting between the road and the dark tree line. I don't know what that figure was. Maybe a ghost, maybe something worse. But that night, I realized the highway doesn't just test your driving skills. It tests your very will to keep going. Over the years, I've heard stories from other truckers, too. Things that make your skin crawl and your stomach knot. Tales of phantom hitchhikers who vanish when you turn to offer a ride. Of haunted rest. Stops where the spirits of lost drivers roam freely, looking for company. Some swear they've seen headlights in the rearview mirror that never get closer, no matter how fast they drive. Others talk about roads that appear on no maps, roads that lead you in circles until you lose your mind. I used to think those were just tall tales, but after what I've lived through, I'm not so sure anymore. The highway is like a living nightmare that never ends, but I guess that's what keeps me coming back. It's a strange kind of freedom, driving into the unknown with only the stars and my rig for company. Every mile has a story, every shadow a secret, and every night behind the wheel brings a new chapter in a tale I never wanted to tell but can't stop sharing. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. The highway isn't just a road, it's a gateway to the strange, the unexplained, and the downright terrifying. And sometimes, if you're unlucky, it's where the horror catches up with you. So if you're out there watching this, maybe planning your own journey down some lonely stretch of road, take my advice. Keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and remember that you never really drive alone. The highway's got company, and sometimes it rides shotgun. I'll tell you about a time that really shook me. Something that made me rethink everything I thought I knew about this job. I was hauling a heavy load through the back roads of West Virginia. It was late, pitch black out, the kind of darkness that swallows your headlights whole. The radio had died hours ago, and the only sound was the rhythmic thump of the tires on the pavement. Suddenly, up ahead, I saw a figure standing on the side of the road. Young woman, soaked to the bone, her clothes torn and dirty. My first instinct was to stop and see if she needed help, but something in the pit of my stomach screamed at me not to. Still, I pulled over and called out, "Hey, you all right?" She didn't answer, just stood there staring at me with those hollow eyes, unblinking like she was trying to look straight through me. Then she slowly lifted her hand and pointed down a narrow dirt path that led off into the woods. I thought about calling the cops, but the place was so remote, I probably wouldn't get a signal. Before I could say anything else, she vanished. Just like that, without a sound or a trace. That night, my truck's dashboard flickered and the GPS started rerouting me along that dirt path she pointed to. I swear I almost followed it, curiosity clawing at me, but something inside kept me driving straight. When I looked in my rearview mirror later, the woman's figure was there, standing on the side of the road, watching me disappear into the night. I called a buddy the next day, told him what happened, and he just sighed. "You crossed into the hollow," he said. "Old stories say it's cursed. People vanish there, trapped between worlds. You were lucky to get out." That story stayed with me, as did the many others, like the time I found a child's doll, sitting on the dashboard when I woke up in the middle of the night, even though I never brought one with me, or the time a voice whispered my name over the CB, but when I replied, the radio went dead. Truck driving isn't just about moving freight, it's about navigating a world that hides secrets in the shadows, secrets that only reveal themselves when you're alone with the endless road and the night. Every mile carries a story. Some are just waiting to catch you unaware. So if you're out there listening to my story, keep your eyes open and your doors locked. Because out here on the highway, the weird and the terrifying aren't just legends, they're real. And sometimes they ride right alongside you even if you can't see them. I'll never forget another time, a few months after that foggy night in the Smokies. I was making a run through West Texas, hauling a load of produce across the barren plains under a sky so vast it felt like you could see forever. It was late, maybe 2 in the morning, when I noticed a figure standing by the side of the road. At first I thought it was just some hitchhiker, but something about the way they stood there, still, almost too still, gave me pause. I slowed down, thinking maybe they needed help. As I rolled closer, I realized the figure wasn't moving at all, just staring straight ahead with eyes that seemed too hollow, too empty. I honked, flashed my lights, but they didn't blink or react. I passed by and kept my eyes on the mirror, but the figure never moved, never got into a car or disappeared. It was like they were stuck there, frozen in time. Later on, I asked around at a truck stop, and one of the old-timers told me stories about the Watcher, a spirit said to haunt the highways of Texas, always standing by the roadside waiting for someone to notice, to remember. They say if you stop for the Watcher, you don't leave the highway the same. Some say you never leave at all. That kind of talk might sound crazy to some folks, but out here, in the quiet of the night with only the hum of your engine and the stars above, you learn to respect the stories, even if you don't fully believe them. Then there was the night I was driving through a stretch of road in Oklahoma, known locally as Devil's Pass. It's a twisting, narrow stretch, with cliffs dropping off on one side and dense forest on the other. I'd heard the legends about it, how people have disappeared there without a trace, how the air sometimes turns icy cold even in the middle of summer, how strange lights dance on the horizon. That night I was running late and had to take that route. As I drove through, the temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath inside the cab. Then the radio started crackling with static and faint voices whispering warnings. My GPS glitched and kept rerouting me in loops. I kept my eyes on the road, heart pounding. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow dart across the trees, too big and fast to be an animal. I swear, for a second, I felt breath on my neck, even though the windows were rolled up tight. I made it through Devil's Pass by the skin of my teeth, never looking back. But I knew something was watching me, waiting for the next time I'd be foolish enough to drive that cursed stretch. These aren't just stories to scare newbies. They're warnings. The highway carries more than just freight. It carries echoes of the lost, the forgotten, and the restless. If you listen closely, sometimes you can hear their voices carried on the wind. Sometimes you see them in your mirrors, or feel their presence riding shotgun beside you. So if you're ever out there driving alone in the dead of night, remember to keep your eyes open, your wits about you, and your foot on the gas. Because on these roads, the past is never really gone, and sometimes it reaches out to hitch a ride. I remember one time, driving through the heart of the Midwest, the sky a blanket of thick, restless clouds, the kind that makes the whole world feel suspended between daylight and night. It was a long haul from Nebraska down to Arkansas, and I was running behind schedule, pushing my rig through endless stretches of highway that seemed to twist and turn like some ancient serpent. Around midnight, just as I was rolling past a rundown truck stop that looked like it hadn't seen a paintbrush in decades, I felt that unmistakable chill settle in the cab. Not the kind that comes from a draft or cold night air, but something deeper, like the highway itself was breathing down my neck. Out of nowhere, my radio popped on full blast, drowning out the hum of the engine with static and a voice so faint, I barely caught it. At first it was just broken fragments, words like help, don't stop, and run cutting through the hiss. But then the voice grew clearer, more desperate, almost pleading. I slammed my hand down on the volume knob, but the voice kept coming, riding the waves of static like some ghost trapped inside the frequencies. I glanced into my side mirror and saw a flicker of movement, a figure standing just off the shoulder, too close for comfort, but when I blinked, they were gone. No trees, no bushes, nothing but the empty stretch of asphalt stretching out behind me. My heart hammered in my chest as I gripped the steering wheel tighter, telling myself it was just fatigue playing tricks, that it was probably some prank or radio interference. But that wasn't all. The GPS suddenly rerouted me off the main highway and down some narrow, winding back road I'd never seen before. The road twisted so sharply I had to slow down, and the headlights barely pierced the thick fog rolling in, swallowing the asphalt, like it was alive. Every mile I drove, the sense of being watched grew heavier, like dozens of unseen eyes were tracking my every move from the shadows. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but no matter how far I looked back, the feeling only intensified. Then the strangest thing happened. My dashboard lights flickered, and for a brief moment the cab went completely dark, save for a faint, ghostly glow from the rearview mirror. In that mirror, I saw a pale face staring back at me, eyes wide and hollow, mouth frozen in a silent scream. I yanked the wheel hard to the right, the truck skidding but holding steady, and press the accelerator like my life depended on it, because maybe it did. When the cab lights came back on, the face was gone, and the fog began to lift, revealing the familiar stretch of highway ahead, just as the GPS switched back to the main route. I made it out of that nightmare patch of road, but I swear, the image stayed burned in my mind long after the truck was parked for the night. It's stories like these that remind me, this highway isn't just a path between towns. It's a place where the past bleeds into the present, where those who've disappeared linger in the dark corners, waiting for someone to see them, to hear their stories. And sometimes, just sometimes, they catch a ride with you. So when you're out there on those lonely roads with nothing but the headlights and the night to keep you company, remember this: the highway has secrets, and it never forgets. Keep your eyes open, and whatever you do, don't stop for the things that don't belong on the map. I'll never forget the way that night ended, the way the dawn finally broke over the horizon like a promise that I'd made it through something I wasn't meant to. But the truth is, those moments on the road don't just fade away, they linger, like a shadow in your peripheral vision or a whisper in the hum of your engine, reminding you that you're never really alone out there. Every mile I've driven since, I've kept one hand on the wheel and the other on the radio, half expecting those voices to come back, half hoping they won't. After that experience, I started talking to other truckers, trying to see if anyone else had stories like mine. Turns out plenty did. There was old Jim, a grizzled veteran with 100,000 miles under his belt, who told me about a stretch of highway where the GPS always went haywire, rerouting drivers into nowhere, and how he once saw a car that vanished right before his eyes. Or Maria, a young driver who swore she'd had a phantom hitchhiker climb into her cab during a foggy night, only to disappear by morning, leaving behind an icy chill that no heater could fix. These stories weren't just tall tales. They were warnings, coded messages passed between those who understand that the road has its own rules, and breaking them can mean you don't come back. One of the most haunting things about being on the highway at night is how the ordinary turns sinister. A flicker of headlights that shouldn't be there, a shadow that moves against the flow of traffic, a radio crackle that carries voices from the beyond. You learn to trust your gut because the highway won't always show you what's real until it's too late. Sometimes I'd swear I felt the truck vibrate with a coldness that seeped into my bones like the air itself was carrying something malevolent. There was one time near the Appalachian Mountains where the fog rolled in so thick I couldn't see past the grill, and I heard footsteps pacing alongside my rig for miles. I checked every mirror, every blind spot, but nothing was there except that heavy, unnatural silence. I started keeping little things in the cab, tokens from those who'd vanished or warnings from other truckers, like old charms or faded photos taped to the dashboard. They're not protection in the traditional sense, but a reminder that I'm not the only one out there carrying memories of the road's darker side. I think that's part of the unspoken brotherhood of truckers, the ones who keep rolling even when the road whispers threats in the night. At the end of the day, I keep sharing these stories not just because they thrill or scare, but because they matter. They remind us that the highway isn't just a route from point A to B. It's a place where lives intersect, where the veil between worlds grows thin, and where some stories never really end. So if you're ever out there, cruising down a lonely stretch of road when the radio crackles to life or the fog starts rolling in too thick, listen close. And remember what I told you. On the highway, you never know what's riding shotgun. Stay safe out there, friends.